Peace, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On TiLT, the state of Black mental health and policing in America. I'm Julius Boatwright, and we usually have Miss Dannielle Brown here. We are co-hosting. She may be calling in today, but if not, we will still have a phenomenal conversation. Again, it is Mental Health Awareness Month in May, so we've just been bringing on some phenomenal Black mental health professionals to talk with us about managing our mental health, all of the racial reckoning situations that we've been having, and how we can just find balance as Black folks, not only in Pittsburgh and throughout our area, but wherever you tune in from. We do want to make sure that you have some sort of balance and get some mental wellness and mental health tips in your life. So like we usually do before we get started, we want to take a quick moment and acknowledge the folks who are no longer with us and do a moment of silence. So please join us. All right, everybody. So I am really excited about today's episode. I'm excited about all of our episodes, but today we have just a fantastic mental health professional, social worker, entrepreneur, author. She really does a little bit of everything, but at the same time, one of her main areas of expertise is helping folks, helping healers, and helping professionals really figure out strategies and tools and techniques on ways that they can prevent burnout and compassion fatigue. So, in this work that we do, again, whether it's in the mental health space, if we're advocates, activists, particularly as Black and Brown folks, it's heavy work, and it brings a lot with it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and the load can become heavy. So we have a very, very special guest with us today. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, learn a thing or two in honor of Mental Health Month. So can we please welcome Sharise Nance to the show?
Thank you, Julius. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here. I had to check and make sure I wasn't on mute. I know that's like been the statement of the year. You're on mute.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you for
Okay.
joining us, Sharise.
Yep.
I'm always so excited to talk with you because you like just bring this sense of like calm in every conversation you step into, whether it's virtually or in person. So I appreciate your presence. So for people who don't know who you are and what you do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Again, I am Sharise Nance, and I am a Pittsburgh native. I am the co-owner and founder of Hand in Hand Counseling Services. It's run by my good friend Tess Kinney and business partner. We've been around. We'll be celebrating 8 years in November, so we're excited about that. That is a big deal for anybody who's in business, especially small Black women business owners during these tough times. We have a group practice. We expanded from a very small office space in East Liberty, and we grew into a full group practice where we have several clinicians, and we run individual therapy where we focus on depression, anxiety, complex trauma, to the day-to-day stuff, like the work-life balance and the daily stressors that probably everyone is struggling with right now. And I also run an organization. It's called Vitamin C Healing. No, I am not selling vitamins. That's one of the first things that I get asked, but it is metaphoric for healing of the whole person, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, mentally. And it's evolved to focus on those helping and healthcare professionals and also entrepreneurs who are struggling with self-care, work-life balance and integration, compassion, fatigue, and burnout. And we do that through our workshops. All of them are virtual right now. And we also do that through our books and our upcoming online courses. And I do still find time for rest.
Yes, yes, rest is important. So,
Yes, it is.
as we were sharing with the folks before the show and doing our marketing and talking about what we were going to be exploring today, you are very passionate about compassion fatigue and burnout, and it's an area of specialty of yours. I've participated in some of your workshops and trainings on that topic. They've been super beneficial for me. So one thing I think is important to do for folks is to just talk a little bit about compassion fatigue and burnout and give us a better idea of what those terms mean.
Definitely. Well, first I want to, share, I think it's important to connect the story to it, like why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I struggled with it. I think many people who are in this realm, whether you're a social worker, mental health therapist, case manager, if you're an activist, a nurse, a doctor, anyone who is providing care to people who have experienced pain, suffering, and trauma, you are prone to it. You are at risk for compassion fatigue. I refer to it as the common cold because we are prone to it. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to catch it, but we are at risk just because of the line of work we're in. And I know that I struggled with it several times in college. I just did not know what it was. And I remember attending a conference on trauma because in this profession, we got to get continuing education credits just to make sure we can continue to practice. And they started talking about this concept of compassion fatigue. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's something that I'm struggling with. Experienced it several times throughout my career. And I think it came to a head at my last job before I left and decided to do the practice full time. And I remember being ready to, write my second book, just felt this sense of urgency to get this out. And I remember my husband saying, like, what if you talked about what you're struggling with? I'm sure a lot of your colleagues are struggling with that. What's that called? It has to be called something. And I'm like, it's called compassion fatigue. And I couldn't believe that there wasn't more attention being brought to this concept. So I started doing more research on it. I got trained in it, I got certified in it, and then I decided to, take it to my colleagues and connecting with organizations to make sure that my colleagues had an understanding, to make sure that they were, excuse me, that they were giving this area attention the same way we do other trainings. And, because at the end of the day, if we are experiencing compassion satisfaction, which is on the other side of that, everybody wins. The helping professional wins, the organization, most importantly, we're building stronger communities if we don't have, exhausted and fatigued workers out here working with people. So that was the reason why I got started with doing compassion fatigue workshops. And there is a difference between compassion fatigue and burnout. Not a big difference. They're in the same family. The major difference is that compassion fatigue is connected to being exhausted from just empathizing and working with people who have experienced pain, suffering, loss, and trauma. So it's more about that relationship and just feeling empty, like you have nothing else to give. And then along with that comes the guilt for feeling that way. And sometimes we experience those intense emotions like apathy and cynicism if we let it fester too long. And then we have burnout, and anyone can experience burnout. Someone, an entrepreneur, the chief executive who's working 70, 80 hours per week. So burnout is more about, I connect burnout with like organization and system. So people who are exhausted from working. So it's not necessarily connected to your relationship with someone, but it's more about like the work stress, the labor, and I think the symptoms and the signs are very, very similar. And what I also found interesting is that burnout is a medical condition. It's classified as a medical condition by the World Health Organization. So I have signed off on Family Medical Leave Act paperwork for people who are burned out from work. But if you're a helping professional and you are experiencing compassion fatigue, there's nothing for that yet. Hopefully it'll make its way into our diagnostic statistics manual, but as of right now, nothing.
Mm. So, Sharise, do you see any differences or similarities with the way in which, like, a social justice activist or an advocate experiences compassion fatigue and potentially burnout versus, like you mentioned, a doctor or a healthcare professional? Like, are there similarities and differences that you see?
I think there are a lot of similarities, but I think what kind of comes to mind for me when thinking about what the difference or maybe the experience would be is when we're thinking about social activists. They're doing this because, well, both in both positions, you're obviously doing it because you want to. But with social activists, they're out here boots on ground. They're putting their lives in danger. We're talking about leading protests, and it's a lot of Black and brown people who are leading this charge. So they're making themselves targets. So now we're talking about a whole nother level. We're talking about safety. Now with helping in healthcare professionals, just because of the work we're doing, oftentimes we're celebrated, because we're helping. So we are not seen as targets. So we are. There's never really that I guess same fear of our lives being in danger or people coming for us. So I think that's where the major difference is if there is a concern about safety, with the helping a healthcare professional. I know for me, it's when I'm working with someone, sometimes you're thinking like, wow, did I do enough in that session? Did I miss something? Or are they really going to do it? Are they going to take them? Are they going to take their life? Or are they going to take someone else's life? So there's that worry. And, when you're thinking about the social activist who's out there and helping people and doing those type of things, you got law enforcement, you're like on bulletin boards for, law enforcement people. So you're targeted. So, your home might not be a safe place, but with a helping professional, if we are practicing that, that good self-care and we're setting our lives up that way, then we're being intentional about trying to make our homes a safe place. But if you're a target, your home might not be a safe place. Where is a safe place for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to dig a little bit deeper into that, Sharice, because it makes me think of just sticking with the activists and the advocates and the constant impacts of the compassion fatigue and potentially leading to burnout. So as an advocate and an activist, doing this work because I'm passionate about it, and I may be advocating for a cause that I may be going against law enforcement. I may be just in a space where it's creating a lot more anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
tension for me. So, and at the same time, I'm constantly empathizing with people. I'm trying to support people. It feels like I'm just pouring and pouring and pouring. And then when I have an opportunity to maybe relax and fill my cup up, it doesn't completely feel like I can relax or fill my cup up because I'm still worried and concerned about, am I going to be a target? Am I safe? Did I actually do enough? So with that as a mental health professional, how do you help people walk through all those layers to even get to some form of healing or self-care with all those like layers piled on top?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of layers there, and there were a lot of things going through my mind as I was, just listening to you talking. I think one of the first things that comes to my mind are values. Whenever you're doing that level of hard work, you got to know what your core values are. What are your top 3 to 5 values? And, is what you're doing connected to those values? Because I cannot imagine, and I'm eternally grateful for every activist who has been out there, from our ancestors to, people in the present who have, risked their lives and made just enormous sacrifices, just so that you and I can have platforms like this. So, just understanding, what are my values, and just each day having to be intentional, about why am I doing this? Is this connected to my values? And those are hard questions that only that person can answer, because when it gets tough, and when you are feeling like you're on empty, and when you are feeling like maybe it's thankless, and you're this target, you're going to need to lean on something to possibly keep you going. And even if you decide that it can't keep you going, just being okay with that. And I know that's hard, because maybe you're feeling like you let people down. However, are you letting yourself down? So we have to start there too. The whole concept of putting your own oxygen mask on first. And what does that look like? It looks like starting with, really being able to identify, your core values, and then knowing where your boundaries are. I know some of the activists that I know personally, I mean, they just have the biggest hearts. They are there for everyone. And I'm just wondering, like, where it begins and where it ends, and that's talking about boundaries. What are you willing and able to do, and what are you just not willing and able to do, and being okay with saying no. And sometimes you just have to tolerate the responses that come along with you, saying yes to you and saying no to those things. So values, boundaries, and self-compassion, making sure that you're pouring into yourself the same way that you are pouring into everybody else, the same way you're pouring into those communities, because we are like almost like this water bottle, how this water bottle, it was full. Now it's all the way down here. And if I just keep drinking, now it's empty. How can you serve that way? So what are you doing intentionally to make sure that you are keeping that water bottle full? Because we know there are a lot of withdrawals. There's a lot of pouring going out of that water. Do you have a day where you are just like disconnected from it, where you're not taking any phone calls, you're going offline? It can't only be you, like, are there a team of people that you can defer to if people have questions, if somebody needs help, if there's something going on, and there has to be something that be led? It can't only be you. You just can't be all things to all people. And I think this is a lot harder, especially in a region like Pittsburgh. Is we were talking, I think I was talking to John earlier, there's only 22% Black people. So if there's only 22% Black people, how many activists are there in this area? So if you're saying no, it's like, well, dang, who's going to help my people? But how good are you to your people if you're exhausted and burned out? Because when you're exhausted and burned out, now we're talking about what's going on with you, biologically and neurologically. You're affecting that nervous system. You're going to have a nervous breakdown.
Wow. And Sharice, as you're talking, I was thinking about my own journey with compassion fatigue. And I would love to learn more about, like, how exactly do you know when you're burnt out, or if you're moving in that direction of burnout. But I want to hold that for a little bit
Okay.
later in the conversation. But I was thinking about, like, for me, it is extremely difficult for me to say no, and to draw those boundaries and to stick to them, because a lot of my own personal identity is wrapped up in the work that I do, right? And I think that may be the case for a lot of folks. It's like, and let me kind of stretch that out a little bit more. It's like, I had this traumatic incident that happened in my life, or these set of traumatic experiences. They inspired me, or brought about pain in a way that made me realize, like, I don't want to feel that kind of pain anymore. And I want to do whatever I can so that other people don't have to experience that pain. So now, you take up that charge of, like, I'm going to be the one, or at least part of the solution to try to make sure people don't feel that kind of pain, or their circumstances are better with regard to whatever it is: housing, mental health, voting rights, environmental justice, all these different issues. And then um, again, my value and self-worth gets wrapped up in what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for. So even when I do firmly set a boundary and say no, period, I'm still sitting with that, like, wow, like, I wonder if somebody else is going to help, or you start to go through these things that um might just propel you back into saying yes, 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 and then lead to compassion fatigue and potentially burnout. So
Mhm.
how do we challenge those kind of thoughts around, like, I always have to be doing something to be valuable? Because I think that leads to people's burnout.
Very valid and very common. I think first, accepting that the first time you do say no, not the first time, the first few times that you say no, the guilt is going to come. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel super painful because you're naturally a helper. You're used to giving. You're used to being there for people. So we're not going to undo this overnight. We're talking about years of a behavior that we're trying to undo and unlearn. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Like, you don't have to just be like, I'm saying no to everything, but just really taking a pause before saying yes. When there is a request or something happens, taking a pause. How is this going to affect my future self if I say yes to this? Am I okay with that? Am I okay with sacrificing that? And I think sometimes we have to get into our own heads and challenge, these thoughts. What are the benefits and consequences, the short and long term benefits and consequences of me, accepting this? Am I doing this because this is something I'm truly connected to, or am I doing this because I feel obligated? It's something that I have to. And when thinking about it through, or looking at it through those two lenses, you even get a different feel for it. And you're absolutely right. When we have been doing something for a long time and we're passionate about it, it's so easy for us to over-identify with this role. That's why I go back to values. We really have to get connected to those values. And I'll use myself for an example. My values are, family, flexibility, freedom, health and wellness. Those are just some examples. So if what I'm doing does not connect with those, as hard as it is for me to say no, and I've had to say no to some really tough requests. It was really tough for me to say no to some requests recently, but I know it would have been harder for me to accept it, knowing that it wasn't connected to my values, and just understanding how I was going to feel the day of when it was time for me to deliver and fulfill. That wouldn't be fair to the person expecting me, and it wouldn't be fair to me or my family. So I think taking that pause instead of being such in a rush to just say yes and be there, and making sure that you're at people's beck and call, and really asking yourself those questions, and giving yourself space to come up with some honest answers, will go a long way. And just accept that there's no matter which strategy we use, it's not going to take the discomfort away.
Mm, I love that, Sharise. And as you were talking, it made me think of, like, one of the things that I probably still use. I don't think I use it as much, but whenever people would try to encourage me or just give me this feedback and information that you just gave, I'd be like, my default response is like, but this is my calling, right? Like, this is what God called me to do. Like, right, it's like I don't want to say a shield or an excuse, but right. It's like the automatic response of, like, you don't understand. Like, this is I'm doing this for the ancestors. It's like it's some kind of way to kind of, for me at least, keep me in that space of comfort, like the comfortable response of not having to draw the boundaries, of letting go of the guilt and shame of not having to be feeling like I have to be everything to everybody. So I guess my question is, how can we respond to people whenever those kind of things are said, or how can we respond to ourselves whenever we start to go down that line of thinking like, but this is my calling, this is what I was created to do, and I got to go. If it takes 80, 90, 100 hours a week of work, then that's what I'm going to do. How do we challenge that line of thinking?
So, how has that been working for you so far? I mean, that's my first question. I think we need to, and we can ask ourselves that, that's a form of, cognitive behavioral therapy where we are challenging those thoughts, where we're going with those thoughts, because I don't think there's it doesn't have to be either or, either I'm going to be this social justice activist and really help my people, or I'm going to step back and not do it at all. You can do it and have boundaries, and actually having boundaries will be more beneficial to you and your community, because if you have boundaries, when you show up, people are going to get the best of you. But if you don't have boundaries, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be irritated, and the type of work that you're doing, like, you're putting your life in danger if you're showing up burned out. Because when you're burned out, you're exhausted, you're irritable, you're easily triggered, and you might not be thinking clearly. So when we're exhausted and we're burned out, so now we're more in our in survival mode, like we're in that emotional part of the brain. So we're not even thinking logically. So you're really you're a huge liability in that sense.
Wow. I don't know if you've seen this before, Sharise, but there's some videos out there on YouTube that show like demonstrations of activists and community leaders. And now in certain cities, they're starting to actually deploy social workers to these demonstrations. So basically, it's like knowing that some of the activists and advocates are going to need that support in real time to kind of, all right, let's help you uh
De-escalate, yeah.
yeah, like de-escalate in that moment. So I wanted to put that out there because I think that's really, really, really powerful. And as you I want to go back to how I felt when you said how's that going? What do you say? How's that working
How's
for you?
that working for you?
It was like, I don't know if you were specifically asking it to me, but I kind of like just hearing it was like it made me think like about like how was it working for me? And I'm like, it wasn't. Like I was tired constantly. I was irritable. My diet was not what it needed to be. My close, intimate relationships with people that I love were not healthy. And I thought I was excelling at work, but I was still like again performing at like 75% of
Mm,
my capacity because I was like spreading myself so thin. But just when you ask that question, it's not a confrontational question, but it is one that it made me be like, oh, like you got to reflect on this. Like you have to think
mm-hmm,
about this, right? So it wasn't, I didn't, again, I don't know if you were specifically asking it to me or just posing it, but I didn't feel
mm-hmm,
attacked when you were asking it. And I think that becomes part of the challenge is that
mm-hmm,
some people feel like, oh, so you are you questioning me and my like commitment to the work? Like,
mm-hmm.
are you trying to challenge where I am with why I'm doing it? And it can easily get misinterpreted
Can,
as
yeah.
attack when that's not what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it definitely, it's about the delivery, and it has to come from a place of concern, like you're showing up, and you have such a commitment, like what do they say about how loyalty can be our best and worst quality, just depending on, who we're giving it to and how we're using it and when we're using it.
Absolutely. So, Sharise, could you talk a little bit more about, you started to talk about like values and
Mhm.
boundary setting. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe some more tools and strategies that folks can actually use either before they're actually out in the streets advocating and doing the work, whether they're at home, wherever they may be, just some kind of tools and strategies that we could use to mitigate compassion fatigue and burnout as much as we possibly can.
So something that I think would be really helpful is almost like in the moment self-care. So it's not just about in the moment. I'm looking at it as a cycle. So it's, if you're able to prepare, like you know what the day brings, or you know what most of your days are like. So from the time you wake up in the morning, you're just being intentional. So it's about being intentional about every moment of your day, just being in that moment. So, you know, when you're waking up, you're just being mindful of your morning. Like, what can you do to make sure, because your stress response system is always activated because of the work you do. So your baseline is probably up here most of the time. So we want to be more intentional about activating that relaxation response system. So when you're waking up, and just even being mindful of the calls you take. If social media is a trigger, you know, just being mindful of not doing things that will just activate that relaxation response. So, you know, if you're waking up, if meditation is your thing, waking up and doing that, if exercise or some type of movement is your thing, making sure you do that. If you know you need to fuel, making sure that you're eating a full balanced meal. If you know there's a person who's supportive, or you have a supportive group, making sure you start the day. So just being mindful about how you're starting to the day. Now, you know, for me personally, with my line of work, I try to be very intentional about taking calls, you know, first thing in the day, because it's really hard for me to try to be, you know, therapist in my personal life. And then I got to, you know, see clients, run a business, do workshops. So it's like, if I cannot do that, then I'm just going to really put a boundary around that. So just being intentional about, you know, how you're starting that day. So this is before you're going into, you know, your work, or what can possibly be triggering, which you're not going to get away from. You know, if you're an activist, you're a helping professional, your work is triggering. It can be triggering, it can be dangerous. So understanding that, we want to make sure we're starting off with things to activate our relaxation response system. So now, while you're in it, we want to make sure that we are aware of our bodies. We're aware of what's triggering us. So we want to try to be grounded. If you find yourself getting escalated or triggered, you know, because you start breathing a little bit heavier, your heart starts beating a little faster, maybe your body temperature changes, you get a little bit warmer, your stomach starts hurting, you getting body pain. So you know, okay, I'm getting a little triggered, I'm getting hot, I don't feel right. So can I do some deep breathing in a moment? Or, you know, can I drink some water? Or can I think of a calm place? What can I do to bring myself to the present? I'm right here, right now. It's 12:33 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. I'm safe in this moment. So when you're in that moment, doing things to ground you and bring you in that moment, even if it's focusing on a time of day, if it's focusing on, you know, things around you, if it's focusing on nature, just something to bring you in the moment. And then afterwards, and I think afterwards and the rest of the day are also very important, because a lot happens when you're like actually in that moment, when you're in the trauma. You want to make sure you are doing things to release it. You know, don't go home and go to sleep. I know we want to because we're exhausted, but self-care is work. So this might mean that you're going to, you know, journal. And it doesn't mean like a diary entry, but maybe you just write down some intense emotions that you're feeling in a moment. Are you angry? Are you frustrated? You know, are you exhausted? Are you irritated? Are you disappointed? What are these emotions? You know, take about a minute to write all of these emotions down, and then do some deep breathing, do some walking around. Like we have to get these out. We cannot keep these in, because this buildup is what leads to compassion fatigue, burnout, anxiety, depression, because it's, you know, it's days, years, if not decades of build out that we're just keeping in. This stress has to be metabolized and doing some type of movement. You know, it can be taking a walk, it can be a stretch. If you're a high intensity person, do a HIIT workout. If you want to go for a run, do that, but something to make sure that you're moving that stress throughout the body. And, you know, just reflect on, you know, what went well. You know, you got through it, you're here. You know, just visualize how you were able to get through that. You were able to help some people. And if you do need to, you know, write down some worry thoughts or some things that didn't, you know, go right or the way you expected, just put a time limit on that, and commit to when you're going to let that go. So just, you know, to recap, you know, at the beginning of the day, doing things to activate that relaxation response, setting boundaries around who you're talking to, what you can do to make your body feel at peace, at a safe place when you're in that moment, grounding yourself so that you can be present afterwards, doing things to make sure that you're releasing it.
Thank you for that, Sharise. I just wanted to call attention to Andrea. I hope I'm saying your name right. Andrea Coleman. Thank you for acknowledging the mental trauma that exists in us. Yes, thank you for acknowledging the mental trauma that exists in us. Thank you for sharing and being here with us. We appreciate you. So, and Sharise, every time you say something, I think of it makes me think of something else, right?
Oh,
And I
that's
think
good.
that
Okay.
one of the main challenges that I see and I've experienced with myself personally,
Mm-hmm.
and with a lot of the folks that we work with in the community, is that folks say, "I don't have time," right? Like it's like I
Mm-hmm.
can recall like multiple conversations where
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of it kind of becomes like a back and forth with people. You're exploring like, well, what about this? Or have you thought about that? And it's just like, I got kids and I got
Mm-hmm.
jobs and I'm out in the streets. And so like, again, I think it's one of those narratives that we can create and we latch onto that makes us believe that we don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Yeah.
have any kind of
Yeah.
advice or recommendation on how to like challenge those thoughts and how to be intentional. I think you started to speak to it, but how to be intentional about opening up opportunities to have
At the
time.
time. Yeah.
5, 10, 15.
Yeah, that's a very common one. Sometimes there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes we might feel like we need 25/8, if not more. And I know time management is a thing, but I've started to think more about energy management. It's where we're putting our energy that sucks our, if it's sucking our energy, we don't have energy, then no, there's not going to be any time. So I think we need to be mindful about what we're giving our energy to. I know all of us here are on social media, because if you're on social media, if you're watching us right now, so I would start there. How much time are you spending on social media? The average scroller, is like, I read somewhere maybe 3 hours a day. So 3 hours a day, that's 21 hours a week. What if you cut that in half? So now that gives you like 10 and a half, 11 hours that you could have. Even if you cut it in a quarter, we found 5 hours. It's just like saving money. We can almost always find, if we do an inventory, we can find some money, we can find some time. So, 5 hours. So we just found 5 hours. I'm not going to ask anybody to start by devoting 5 hours to self-care if it's something that you haven't done, because it might not be sustainable. You might quit because it's not something that you're used to. But we got to start small. I just wanted to give the example of, we can find time if we do an inventory on the things that we are devoting a lot of time to, that might actually be time wasted, not really time invested. So even if you start small by 5 minutes a day, for 7 days, non-negotiable self-care activity. I talk about this a lot, and I think it applies to no matter what work you're doing. For 5 minutes every day, this is what I am going to do for me, regardless of what's going on. Whether it's in the morning, if it's in the middle of your day, or if it's at the end of the day. If it's the kids and your house is just full, that might mean I'm going to sit in my bathroom and lock the door and turn some calming music on my phone for 5 minutes. That could be self-care. So we just have to start small. It doesn't have to be this, lavish, spa day. That sounds great, but we don't have to start there. But just getting into the practice of doing something for yourself, and just notice what it feels like as you committed that 5 minutes to just you. Like, there was no one else included in that time but you. Notice, what did that feel like? Did you feel selfish? Did it feel good? And be honest about how you felt, because I think that'll help you as you go along in your journey and continue to be more intentional about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Sharise. And I want to raise up a few more comments that we have.
Mhm.
So Andrea, and again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. said that she has a grandson, 29 years old, who has a diagnosis of
Mm-hmm.
schizophrenia and would
Mm-hmm.
benefit from hearing this. And she
Mm-hmm.
shared that he is being forced to be employed, but this
Oh,
worries her with his condition. So I wanted to first thank you for sharing that and
yeah.
and lifting him up in our conversation.
Yeah.
This makes me think, Sharice, about um, the employment situations, right?
Yeah.
Folks, whether we have a diagnosis or we don't have a diagnosis, and I'm looking at it from two different perspectives. One, how we as individuals can advocate for ourselves and our
Mm-hmm.
own balance and well-being when we're trying to navigate those kind of conversations with the employers. And then on the flip side, because right, you being an entrepreneur and an employer as well, like what can we do to better support the needs of folks, so that we can be intentional about
Mm-hmm.
not pushing our people to burnout and to having compassion fatigue. So you could either address both or whichever one feels more
S-
for
So I
you.
guess like the last question, can you ask that again? I just want to make sure I'm clear the
Yeah.
part about what can we do.
So and again, just lifting up Andrea's comment about her son, like as an employer,
Mm-hmm.
believe, and I believe as a mental health advocate, that we should be doing everything within our power to ensure that the people who work with us on our teams are having time for self-care, having
Yeah.
time for balance, and we're not just, you know, it's one thing to hold folks accountable for getting their job done, but it's another thing to find that balance and create that balance for them. I've like, for example, I tell everybody on our team, like, did you do your hour of self-care per week? Like, at work. Like, you're going to get paid for that hour, and I am recommending that you use an hour of your work week for self-care. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I have to remind folks. Sometimes they have to remind me.
Yeah.
So not all employers do that. Some employers are like, I pay you to do a job. I don't care what you have going on. Like, get the job done. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering from a
Yeah.
maybe from an employer
Yeah.
perspective, how you approach that.
Yeah, because and I do think, and we're talking about compassion fatigue and burnout, they're systemic. So I don't think it's fair to just place that burden or that responsibility at the feet of the worker. Like, well, you figure it out, you do self-care. Like, we'll send out these self-care memos, take care of yourself, but that's so vague. How can everybody possibly know what that means or even know how to take care of themselves? When I do these workshops and I ask people, what were you taught about self-care? The first thing people say is hygiene. I was taught to have good hygiene. So if as employers, we're telling people to make sure you take care of yourselves, not everybody's going to know that that means like, okay, so they're giving me permission to, take a mental health day, or they are, telling me that it's okay for me to, I can use my lunch break for self-care or what have you. I think as employers, it's very important for us to make sure that our staff understand the importance of good self-care and not only talk about it, but we model it. I know at our organization, we're not burning our therapists out by giving them a lot of cases. And it's hard because we have a waiting list. A lot of people need help right now, but we are not going to overextend our therapists to make them burn out or, struggle with compassion fatigue, because that's a liability. It's not fair to them and it's not fair to the people that we're helping. So I think that's the most important thing that an employer can do is to make sure that you are modeling it, by not by ensuring that your staff is not overextending, and we have supervision. So we're checking in, what does that look like for you? What are you doing to take care of yourself? So we're being very specific and just being flexible. Yes, we have a job to get done. We can do both. We can get our job done and we can take care of ourselves, and we can understand that every day is not going to be super productive, and that's okay. The work is still going to get done.
Absolutely. And Sharice, I know we're winding down. We got about 15 minutes left.
Top
Yeah,
class. Yeah.
yes, I know we didn't necessarily talk about this, so it's you could tell me no if you know you feel like you want to just kind of not do this. But I know you said you mentioned modeling different things, modeling stuff for our employees, and then just modeling this kind of um, behavior, if you will, these changes for folks. Because and to give more context to your earlier comment of like telling people just hey practice good self-care, a lot of folks like don't even really understand. Number one, they don't understand what it really means to practice good self-care. And
Mhm.
even when we say like hey, do this thing, people may be uncomfortable because they've never done that thing before. So I'm just curious if you have some kind of quick easy practice that maybe you'd be willing to guide us through a 30-second, a 1 minute long, something that folks can kind of walk away, can participate with us on this conversation, and then maybe they can walk away with it. And if it's not you doing it or leading it for us, maybe even just saying, well, here's the tool and here's how you do it.
So
And
so
self-care.
so I'm wondering, like, are you asking like what we do with our staff, or you're asking for a tool in general?
Like more general. So for just
Okay, okay.
it could be for just a general person. So it could be for an activist or somebody who's watching, or it could be for somebody who's an employer who wants to implement it with their people. But you know, whether it is a certain mindfulness technique or some kind of meditative thing or something like that, so that folks can say, okay, I actually learned this thing and now I'm going to try to implement it myself.
Okay. Yeah, I can lead a meditative practice. I'm okay with that. All right. So I'll just ask everybody just to make sure you're sitting in a seat. And if you are comfortable, just go ahead and close your eyes. If not, you can keep them open with a softened gaze and just allow yourself to get into your body. Feel the ground under your feet. Feel your body in your seat. And just notice your breath. You're not judging it, you're just noticing the rhythm of your breath. Is it smooth? Is it rigid? Is it fast? Is it slow? Just noticing your breath. Now we're going to bring attention to the temperature in your body. Is it warm? Is it hot? Is it humid? Or is it cool? Just noticing the temperature in your body. You're just being an observer. You're not judging or trying to change anything. Now we're going to do a scan of your body, looking for areas of tension. Is there a difference between your lower body and your upper body, your right side and your left side? What do you notice? Just being an observer. Now we're going to bring awareness to your heart, and feel free to place your hand over your heart if that feels safe, and just notice the rhythm of your heartbeat. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is this the normal rhythm of your heart? Just noticing. Now we're going to bring attention to your face. Bringing awareness to your jaws. Are they clenched? Are they relaxed? The position of your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your eyebrows. Are they raised? Are they relaxed? Just noticing the position on your face. Okay. Remembering to breathe. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and just bring your awareness back to the room around you and wiggle your feet, your hands, your arms to kind of wake up those muscles. And welcome back. And that's a brief body scan. And that's a great way to scan for areas of arousal, because when we get stressed, it starts in our body. We carry our stress in our body. The concept the body keeps the score is very, very true. It happens in our body, but if we're so busy and we're not being mindful and we're not aware, we'll miss it. We won't know. And then it can develop into something else. But if we're doing that regularly, and you can do a body scan anyway, that's just one way. And we're noticing areas like, okay, I think my shoulders are holding some tension. So that's information. When you find yourself in a situation, you'll remember, oh, my shoulders are tense. What's going on? Maybe I need to slow down here. Do I need to, kind of reel myself back in? So that's a body scan just to give you some awareness and information about where you may be holding tension and for areas of arousal.
Thank you for doing that on the spot, Sharise. I almost didn't want to ask because I'm like, well, we didn't talk about it ahead of time. I know you always have something in your toolbox, and I want to say that I can just imagine, or I can only imagine, what it would be like for folks, for activists, like when we're marching, when we're demonstrating, when we're boots on the ground, and if we all were to do that before, like getting into that work, like what, I'm just wondering what kind of energy that would bring to before, after, like I
That's
think it
interesting.
really powerful, because I mean, even in this moment, like I didn't know that I was tense. You know what I mean? We
Most
just
of us don't.
and
I
it
think I know. I'm willing to go out on a limb and say I know it would make a difference. It would even make a difference in the schools. I've done trauma informed training, for schools to get school officials on board with, how kids are being approached when they're having a hard time. So instead of using the old school traditional discipline approach where we're sending them out the classroom, and if they're still in school suspension or out school suspension, what if we started to be more intentional, like first thing in the morning we do some type of math on this practice, so it teaches them how to get into their body and to be engaged.
Absolutely. So, Sharise, before we wrap up, before we give you a chance to kind of give your final thoughts, there's one last question in the comments. And Andrea has been with us, engaged with us.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
She says, how do you even present to an employer that you have mental illness? So if you have any advice on that.
I think that that's a really tough one, because I think you have to know your audience. And I think number one, it's like, what are you, I'm always looking at the outcome of the situation. What are you hoping to get out of it? Like, are you hoping for some compassion? Or are you hoping for some accommodations? What is the reason that you would be sharing this information? because and it's hard because I wish as a society we can fully make that transition to where we viewed a mental health condition the same way we do a physical medical condition, like diabetes or cardiovascular or COPD. They're all conditions, but there's still this huge stigma around mental health, all the misconceptions. Oh, it's all in your head. It's not that serious. Just get over it. It's not something you can will your way out. It is part of a medical diagnosis. So really thinking about what you're hoping to get out of that conversation by presenting to your employer. And I'm always a fan of documentation beats conversation. So you might want to consult with your doctor and have that paperwork presented to your employer, because sometimes, unfortunately, it's like this. Sometimes, coming from the employee, it doesn't hold as much weight. They're going to want documentation.
I like that, Sharise. Documentation beats conversation. So when you can give that employer something tangible, and that employer now knows there is a paper trail that is validating,
But they
right?
have to follow. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they have to do something. Great. Yeah. Great recommendation. Final thoughts, final words you want to share with folks? You want to tell us what you're doing, where to follow you? Any final thoughts you have?
Yeah, just remember all of the kindness, compassion, support, and energy and efforts that you all are pouring out into the community. We're definitely grateful, but we'll be even more grateful if you are able to turn that inward and pour it into you. Because when you're pouring it into you, you're going to feel better, and you'll be able to give more, because we don't want to take that away from anyone, because that's what makes you who you are. That's what makes you great. And as far as what I'm doing, we're still running hand in hand counseling services, workshops. I practice what I preach, and I say no to things, and I set those boundaries. But if you'd like to follow me across all social media platforms, Sharise Nance, my name, SHARISE NANCE. We send weekly emails out through our website. So if you want to get on our mailing list, vitaminchealing.com, and you will subscribe to our weekly self-care emails that we send out on Wednesdays, and you'll also get any updates and specials that are going on. And if you are, working for or with an organization, or you're leading an organization, and you believe that your organization could benefit from a compassion fatigue workshop, or a take a pause mindfulness series, please reach out to us at info@vitaminchealing.com.
Thank you, Sharise. Thanks for making time, for walking us through that body scan on the fly. I didn't know how much I needed that, so I'm sure other people benefited from it. We appreciate you, and I hope you get to take care of yourself too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Well, thanks, y'all, for joining us. Next week is the final On Tilt for Mental Health Awareness Month. So we do have some special guests that will be joining us next week to continue this conversation. Just because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, it's going to end. It doesn't mean that we have to stop focusing on our mental health. So let's make mental health awareness happen every single day, y'all. So we love y'all. We appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next week.
Yep.